Luis. We are members of South Bay Community Care. I think we're here for episode 2 of Better Off Left. Is that correct? Or is this 3? Are we doing episode? There's a lot of stuff we still have to figure out, Loki. But we're back again. I think today we're talking about Newsom and this circus of a recall that is currently taking place. A circus for a myriad of reasons. There are a lot of clowns involved. But yeah, we're going to get into that today. And through that, we're going to be talking about the Democratic Party, the political spectrum that we're currently trying, or trapped, I'd say we're trapped within, perhaps others would say otherwise. So we'll get into it now. I guess where I find myself with this particular issue, that issue being this recall that Newsom is going through right now, is like, it's really something to watch, to see the entire Democratic Party just form, like just like come together like Voltron to really defend like one of their guys.
Right.
And I guess what's weird about it is of course, these people, like, this is a national thing, right? Like, you have national people showing up to support the local guy. But the thing about the local guy is the locals know about him. You know what I mean? Like, we all know and experience what this guy is, his policies, what he's doing, what he's not doing, who he's hurting, who he's not hurting. And so when the national party comes together to, like, get all rah-rah for a guy like Newsom, what gets odd for me is it's like, bro, we know who this guy is. Like, just because Biden shows up today, or just because Kamala shows up a couple days before, and they're like, yo, we got to vote for this guy, you got to support Newsom. It's like, yo, I live in California. Like, I see what the circumstances people are living under. Like, you can't, what is the game you're playing here? But I guess what, for me, one of the details that stuck out for me, Luis, is I want to say today actually. So when Biden comes today, he didn't start here. He actually went to Central California initially to check out the Calder fire, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And the reason he went over there is that, you know how these politicians love to do. Like, there's a natural disaster, they come, they walk around, and they just take photo ops, right? Shake hands with firefighters, the cops, and then they leave, right? But it's so wild to me that you have this figure, right? The president of the United States comes to support this local governor, but prior to doing so, goes to see, like, one of the largest symbols of that governor's failures, right? Yeah. So this fire is so, like, it's been like a month-long fire at this point. You see, there's been about over 1,000 structures destroyed, about a vast majority of which are homes, right? Like, I think the number's around 782 or something like that. Homes have been destroyed, about 5 people injured, tens of thousands of people evacuated, right? It's really bad stuff. And I found it so jarring that this guy shows up. It would be like if you're like a fan and I'm an athlete and you come to my worst game ever to come big me up, in the post game or something like that. Like, it was just like, what? There's no irony in this to you, that you're standing in the ashes of this man's actions. And to what some people might say to that is, well, it's not like Newsom set the fucking fire, right? Like, it's not like he was running through the forest with a lighter or anything like that. But I mean, if you look at the guy's record, like, we all know what causes these forest fires, right? If it's not what was the big one last year? If it's not oh my goodness. Yeah, but the one that was caused by the gender reveal, that's what I was saying. If it's not a gender reveal, then it's probably climate change. You know what I mean?
Right.
And even when it is the gender reveal, it's made worse by the climate change.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you look at this guy's record, right, like, we're talking thousands of oil and gas permits, right? We're talking, and then when he says he's going to, like, drop the ban, it's like, what, 2024 or something like that? Like, it's always kicking the can down the road and, just kind of stalling it out. And so it's like, I mean, even if you want to say that he's not directly responsible for the fire, okay, cool. But what is he doing to stop, to mitigate the damage, to do what some people love to say, harm reduction, right? Because they love to associate that with voting for the Democratic Party. But I'm talking a lot here, so I'll let you come in because I'm sure you have things to bring up about his opponents.
No, yeah, those are all really good points. I totally agree with you that, like, literally the whole of the Democratic Party turns out for this guy, and it makes sort of like this national story, and within that story, like we lose our stories, we lose our experience under
Yeah.
a Newsom governorship that uh, I guess outside of California has a progressive, like people see California, like there's a lot of memes that people call it California supposedly, and it has the illusion of being progressive and of being left. But we know that it's not. We know that we have to fight tooth and nail for any sort of like climate change laws to get through. Any sort of like pressing up against fossil fuel industries. Cops are still like funded by the millions, despite the uprisings last year, and he has the charismatic face, kind of what we were talking about last episode, right? He's the more effective evil. But a lot of his policies are very, very right, and at best, just liberal, moderate. But as we talk about, that doesn't cut it. But in regards to his opponents, who are actually right and are actually conservative, we have the main one that's sort of leading, and I think it's going to come down to Newsom versus Larry Elder is what it's looking like for tomorrow. And just to give you a little bit about Larry Elder, he's he's actually a Republican. He's a conservative type, and he advocates for shit like $0 minimum wage, or like I'm exaggerating, but like he doesn't believe in minimum wage. He doesn't believe that like climate change is a thing, or that systemic racism is still a thing, or that police brutality is a thing. Like he's just the loony bin, right? He's the full circus, man. And others besides him who aren't leading to the degree that he is, but that are still like a little behind him, aren't any different, because this recall, it came from the right. If we're honest, it came from a lot of conservative folks in California who see the bare minimum of what Newsom did in response to the pandemic as being equivalent to like a mass lockdowns and trapping you in your home and imprisoning you in your home. So that's what I would have to say about his opponents and where this recall even came from.
And it's so wild to me because so many of the to me this recall is such an encapsulation of why it's important to keep a clear understanding of where you are politically on the spectrum. Because if you listen to the complaints that that these conservative formations are raising with regards to getting this recall moving, a lot of the points are things that we, as self-identified socialist or anarchist or whatever you identify as, that what people generally define as the left. So many of the same problems are being mentioned that we care about, right? Houselessness, the response to the pandemic, all of these things. But like the devil is always in the details, So while they might say that they're concerned about houselessness, it's not coming from a place of humanity and empathy. It's coming from a place of anti-poor, anti-houseless. I want my streets clean. Yeah. I don't want to have to look at the material consequences of capitalism, that type of stuff, right? But at the end of the day, the surface level complaint, right, which is that Newsom, which is that Garcetti, which is that any of these cats out here within California, LA, all the way down to the South Bay, right, none of the responses are adequate. It's an absolutely true statement. But again, it's in those details where you have to realize, like, oh, these people aren't like, looking to actually solve a problem. They're just looking to get a guy out so they can get another dude in, right? Mm-hmm. And nothing actually changes. No, like the power doesn't shift or anything like that. It's just some more privileged folks' lives are made a little bit more convenient. To bring it back to the critique of Newsom, right? Mm-hmm. In 2020, we have the pandemic kind of, ravaging both the general public, but also the incarcerated population, right? Yeah. And so a large response to that is to release a lot of quote unquote nonviolent criminals into the general public, which is obviously, as an abolitionist, something I agree with. Yeah. Simultaneously, though, as he's doing this, there are reports coming out about, hey, a lot of those inmates are helping us fight these forest fires, which during the year of 2020 was like, ravaging, right? It was terrible. And it was just, to me, it was so damning of the current political and social structures that Newsom has, not created, but taken part of and allowed to run rampant, right? Yeah. Like the fact that you let people out of prison and that leads to us not being able to adequately respond to forest fire or like wildfires. Like, are you serious? Like, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely. And remember that fire we talked about earlier, the Calder fire. It's running through like 3 different counties right now. And Gary Bridges, like, I think he's a county supervisor in like Susanville, California, wherever the hell that is.
Right.
He had this wild quote. He gave this wild quote recently about the fires and about this particular situation with the inmates that I'm referring to, where he said, the inmate crews are one of the largest assets Northern California has.
Oh my God.
The largest assets Northern California has. And so this should speak to anybody who is really operating under the general premise that everybody in prison is there because they're bad people who did bad things, right? Even if that were the case, which is not the case, but even if that were the case, right? The fact that these people are referring to those people as assets, which should lead you to believe that, even if these people are bad people who did bad things, this state is dependent upon those people becoming the types of people who would do bad things and therefore end up in prison and therefore end up helping them. You get what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And so whatever hard on crime policies that you want either Newsom or the politician to the right of him to come in and bring about, they're not interested in stopping crime. In fact, they're leaning on the quote unquote criminals to go fight these wildfires for them. And so this is where the conversation of, we have to keep, even though Newsom isn't a leftist or a radical or anything to that nature, he's not the guy to the right of him. And it's like, bruh, we're already there. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we're always fearing slipping further into more fascism and more right-wing tendencies and all this stuff. And it's like, we have the situation going on at the border. We have the situations taking place all throughout Africa with AFRICOM. We have the situation that the U.S. is sponsoring in Palestine. Like, we're here. You know what I mean? This fear of, don't get me wrong, it can always get worse. But it's that weird conversation you begin to have where it's like, once you're talking about like millions of people dead or millions of people captured or millions of people encaged or enslaved, you sound a little goofy when it's like, yeah, it's 10 million people now, but with the guy right to the right of him, it could be 15 million. And it's like, like the numbers don't begin to add up to me, but I don't know. How do you feel about this stuff, man?
I totally agree with you in regards to Newsom is essentially like doing shit that the right would approve of, but he just doesn't have all the aesthetics of the right. He's not saying like racist shit. He's not saying like outwardly conservative talking points. So for Republicans here in California, he's not a conservative when his policies are very conservative. And yeah, it's interesting what you're pointing out in regards to kind of like trying to like calculate between two people that are both evil. Yeah, I agree with you that it's awful regardless. But I like your point that you were mentioning that things could always get worse. And to my estimation, under a California under someone like Elder, someone like a Caitlyn Jenner, someone like a John Cox, I think his name is, it will get worse because these people will be at a seat of power where they could take those glimpses of change that a lot of organizers have been fighting for here in the state, where, yeah, of course, Newsom isn't like the champion of the left or whatever by any stretch of the means, but there is some wiggle room with these type of politicians, politically, locally speaking. You could get a certain bill at the table, right? You could get some kind of a ball rolling. There is some sort of a compromise. Like, these dudes compromise with Republicans federally and at the state government. Like, them's wiggle a lot. Conservatives, Republicans, they don't do that. They don't play that kind of game. They don't wiggle at all. They will repeal environmental justice ordinances and laws. They will repeal some sort of safety net that might have been fought for, right? They will for sure combat glimpses of change, of radical change, glimpses of it, unfortunately, but they will take those things away.
It's interesting, man, because I feel like my perspective of that situation you're describing, the way I would try to describe it is America's trajectory is a downward slope to the right at all times.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have active, focused, and principled formations and movements pulling you up that hill towards the left, right? And it is uphill because it is a struggle and it always will be a struggle. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that, all you really have is either a slow or a fast tumble down that hill towards the right, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, my interpretation of the current political situation within America is that in mainstream politics, you are given two options. You are given that, like, kick in the chest down the hill, which would be the Republican Party, yeah. Or you're given the Democratic Party, which is, I guess, them holding your hand and walking you on down into fascism and social death or rather mass death and, whatever. Mm-hmm. But in any case, it is a move to the right, and down.
Yeah.
And I feel like we lose track of that because of the language and certain things. Like, to me, the George Floyd Act is like the latest example of this. Is after an entire year plus of mass protests, mass movements, mass organizing, and all of these, the re-energizing of old points and the energizing of new points about abolition and defunding the police and all of these other things. The state's response or compromise, right, is, hey, let's give all this money to cops so they can do better by the general public. Now, of course, that's not what they're going to do with that money. Of course, that's not what's going to happen, et cetera, et cetera. But that's the slow trickle down, as opposed to, we're not giving you anything. And those tanks and the National Guard and all those cops that we sent to your neighborhoods during 2020, they're staying, right? And then we get to fall down directly into fascism, and there's no wait, there's no sweet talk.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's what I feel like. That's what all of this feels like to me. I guess what I'm interested in discussing with you and people and, just people in the world moving forward is when we talk about what spaces the Democratic Party provides the radical, right? Or even, dare I say, the revolutionary. What space are we talking about? You know what I mean? Not necessarily, and I'm not even referring to what you just said necessarily, but, when Biden was in the process of potentially being elected, what a lot of people were saying is, and this is what I meant earlier when I said people were referring to Biden or electing Biden as harm reduction, right? If we get him in, less people will be hurt, less people will die, et cetera, et cetera. And in doing so, I feel like we get this image in our heads that if we vote for the Democrat, then that's a tick to the left. And if we vote for, and then if the Republican wins, then that's a tick to the right. When in reality, it's all a tick to the right. It's all just a matter of speed, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like climate change is a good, kind of example of all this. Because it's all cumulative, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So whatever we do to the environment from 2000 to 2010, right, in that decade, it doesn't go away just because we do things slightly better
Mm-hmm.
from 2010 to 2020. You know what I mean? Uh, it's all still just building up, and I think the same is happening within American society today with regards to our political system. Whatever problems, whatever societal ills are, manifesting and festering and spoiling in our in our backyards and in the general public, it's not going away. It's just how slowly we're feeding the flames. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's really all that's being discussed. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is it's concerning, man. It's really concerning.
Yeah, and I totally agree with your accurate observations of the political structure of this country, of the state, but this country at large, is that Biden is essentially, like, especially the things that he's doing now in regards to, like, our continuous colonial foreign policies and our situation, like how we handle our border, how we handle immigrants, how we handle our own people in regards to, like, social safety nets, right? Like, I essentially see Biden as a conservative, so I totally agree with you that the Democrats are nowhere near a party that represents the people in any particular way, as the illusion of being for the people, right? Because that's something that kind of gets people voting to some degree. Like, even like conservative people, if you don't necessarily tell them, like, hey, like, Medicare for all, for example, like, if you don't dress it up that way, but if you kind of tell them, like, oh, like, is medicine expensive? Yes. Like, would you like it better, like, if it was, like, free? Yes, they would, right? Like, people want these progressive policies, so the Democrats run on those things, but they never actually deliver it, whereas the Republicans for sure say we're not going to deliver those things. So it's a tragic situation either way. I guess my question is, someone who feels very strongly about both parties, but especially towards the right, I see both parties as being enemies of the people, but I for sure see, like, the Republicans as being enemies of the people. Well, like, to your mind, to your estimation, what would be the move here?
Mm-hmm. The answer is simply stated, but of course much more difficult to actually do. You know what I mean? Like, it rolls off the tongue very easily to just say, well, we create a radical political party, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we fight for dual power. But the actual organizing of that, right? Like the actual, developing a party line, the actual radicalizing of people who have been propagandized their entire lives to exist within the very fine, political spectrum of Democrat to Republican, right? This is all very difficult in practice, and people have been doing this well before we were even a thought in our parents' minds. And so, yeah, I mean, that is the answer, I'd say, right, is to organize for political power outside of the mainstream political spectrum. But simultaneously, folks exist today, right? And folks have concerns and needs today.
Yeah.
And I understand what people are saying when they say, hey, I don't like a Newsom. I don't like the local Democrat within my neighborhood, or not neighborhood, but you get what I'm saying, your city, county, whatever. But simultaneously, so I get what people are saying when they say this, and it's like, yo, this person might not allow us to create a revolution, or or practice certain, like, socialist politics or communist politics, but they will make sure the buses run on time, and they will, not gut all of the social safety nets within my community. And so I'm going to vote for them because the other guy is seeking to do those things. I get what people are saying, and I'm never going to sit here and, like, finger wag and, try to do the whole holier than thou thing or lefter than thou thing, I guess, in this case. But I think it has to be a simultaneous battle. I feel like if you are going to say that, if you are going to, place that vote, and then talk to you. Because that's the thing, right? Is they're never just asking you to show up and vote, right? They're never just asking you to do that. They're asking you to tell your significant other, your family. They're telling you to big up the person, right? Like the Democrats are never coming to you and just saying, hey, we know this guy sucks. You know this guy sucks. But just vote for him because, you need a few things. That's never what they're saying. They're bigging these people up as like champions of diversity and champions of, civil rights and, all of this nonsense, right? And so they ask you to buy in fully in this way. It's never just show up and check off the box and then go home. But anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is I never want to judge those people, but simultaneously, if you're going to commit any amount of effort to this mainstream process, then simultaneously commit that time either to organizing that is not centered around politics as they are currently constructed within the U.S., or commit that time to developing parties and candidates within those parties that actually, accurately reflect the needs and desires of the peoples within these communities. And I feel like where people struggle, and myself and everyone has struggled, is to do so, to do what we're saying you have to do. You have to be of two minds, right? You have to simultaneously make that conscious decision to say, I am going to compromise in this particular moment for these particular results, but simultaneously I cannot limit myself to just this action.
Yeah,
right? Or
I
what
agree.
this action symbolizes. It seems like it's a far gap, but it's a very thin line between saying, hey, I am going to vote for Biden because I think, maybe less people will die from COVID, right? It's a thin line between saying that and Biden is harm reduction. You get what I'm saying?
That I agree with. Yeah, absolutely.
But people close that distance very quickly mentally, right? Or Biden is quote unquote less racist than Trump, whatever the hell that means. But it's a thin line between that statement and Biden is a civil rights activist, right? Or a civil rights champion, or these types of just kind of nonsense jump statements. You know what I mean? And it's tough. It's tough. I understand where people struggle with it because I struggle with it, and everyone does because we grew up in this country that has just propagandized our brains to mashed potatoes. But you gotta try to hold everything and hold everything at once. I'll say what I told some of the homies, I want to say during the Trump-Biden election, is the best thing you can do for yourself and the people within your community is whatever you choose to do, whether you choose to vote or vote for who, whatever. Just spend as little time as possible on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're gonna do it, show up, check the box, and then go right back outside and start organizing.
Right, exactly.
Don't sit around on the internet arguing with people about who's the right president, who's best for the role. Don't spend any time campaigning for these folks if they're not paying you to do so, because we don't sell out for free around here. That's a waste of time. And so just don't be giving these folks free PR and stressing yourself out over this, man. If you want to go do it, go check the box and then go do the real work because it's out there waiting for you.
If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe. That would really help. I'm really excited to see that number grow. Also, if you would like to contribute to mutual aid efforts, Leon and I work with South Bay Community Care. We have Coffee, we have Venmo, and we have Cash App.
Yep, all of those should be under South Bay Community Care or some variant of it. Again, I always tell people, just double check. We got the social media, so hit us up with the screenshots and ask if it's official. You know what I mean? We'll confirm and all that good stuff. But support, because we had that conversation about real work and things outside of just the mainstream political structure, and that's the stuff, man. So support and show up. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly, and that'll be on the video right here on the screen, and that'll be in the description down below. So thank you, and see you next time.
Peace.